So if I want to work on fire at a heavenly level, what is fire in a phase relationship? What does that mean? It's to do with consciousness, it's to do with awareness, it's to do with all that kind of stuff, yeah? And here it's relating the stomach and the kidneys. So it's actually to do with relating our postnatal chi and our prenatal chi. It's to do with making sure that our body is functioning properly so that we are able to receive consciousness and awareness, so that we're able to process stuff properly.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Qiological. The grass in the backyard was cut 2 days ago. Today, it's already looking shaggy and unruly. The flourishing of summer is no joke here in the Midwest. Viney plants are winding their way up toward the sun. There are riots of blossoms. The peonies are promiscuously fragrant. And the clematis, it's a firework display of purple, maroon, and white. Once again, the foliage hides our neighbors from view. The air is thick with pollen and humidity. The cycles of climate, sunlight, and temperature is a steady reminder that there are seasons to all things, and they change. You can note those changes and perhaps use the momentum of the season to accomplish something like grow some tomatoes in the swelter of the coming late summer, or decide you'll finish that lingering project before the season turns yet again. Here in the West, we say summer arrives at that moment when the sun has reached its apogee and begins its descent from the sky, but the Chinese see summer as arriving in the midst of what we call spring. Just like the New Year is celebrated in the deep cold of winter, but in that deep cold, there is a turning. So too, the flourishing of summer starts to make itself felt around the first part of May. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are firmly in the season of fire, the season of flourishing and expansion. The blood-red maple outside the clinic window has added inches to the tender tips of its growing edge. How will you use the energy and the potential of this season to sink your roots deeper into what nourishes you and expand your growing edges into the unknown of the outer world? These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit AcuFastNeedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
We live within the great cycles of change that are reliably consistent, and at the same time, the particulars of becoming are ever varied and surprising. The movement of the heavens and the cycles of the seasons on Earth are perhaps the oldest source of humanity's stories, sciences, and speculations on the unfolding of the world, and more importantly, perhaps to us humans, our place in it. Today's conversation was sparked by some questions that I had from Deborah Woolf's talk on the heavenly stems. She's doing a 3-part Qiological live series on the heavenly stems and the earthly branches. We have some recordings of those. If that's your cup of tea, you can check out the website for that. I had some questions, a few areas of outright confusion, and a couple of ideas about how the heavenly stems might be reflected in our clinical practices. But I wasn't sure if those ideas held water or were half-baked flights of fancy. So I asked Deborah if I could have an hour of her time to noodle through my thinking and perhaps clarify some questions. And being the generous person that she is, she said yes. I also wanted to record this in case there was something of value that came out of the conversation that might be worth sharing here on the podcast. And that is what you're going to have an opportunity to listen to here in just a moment. One word of warning, this might be a little hard to follow in some places if you've not spent some time looking into the heavenly stems. But I encourage you to stick with this conversation because while the content might be a bit slippery, what you're going to hear is 2 practitioners puzzling out the source code of our medicine. You'll have a front row seat on the process of inquiry as both of us at various times bump up against what we think we understand and find that there are some holes in our thinking. I think that alone is worth a listen. We reference some different charts and some quotes from the classics in this conversation. I'll have those up on the show notes page for you, so it'll make it easier to follow along. We all learned about the earthly Wuxing, 5 phases, but I'll bet you've never heard of the heavenly Wuyun. Xing and Yun, they both mean movement. Heaven and earth, they reflect each other, but they are not the same thing. If you have the feeling that we're going to explore some wheels within wheels, you're right. Buckle up. Here we go. We're going to dive into some heavenly stems. I so appreciated your presentation the other day, and it, all through it, I'm like scribbling little things down. Just, sometimes you hear something and it's like, I wonder if this means that, or this sparks that. And does this make any sense, or am I just making shit up? So
Okay, that's fine. Do you think it was useful to do the introduction before the STEMS presentation?
I do.
I
Yeah.
think so too.
Yeah.
Because if I just jumped in with this, would have been hopeless.
It would be like, yeah, it's like giving someone a hit of LSD if they've never smoked weed.
Yeah.
You need a gateway. You were talking about heaven as being space.
Yeah.
And so does that mean that Earth is about time?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I've heard this idea recently through, I can't remember who it was at this point. But we're often thinking about time and space. Oh yeah, we live in time and space. And we can sort of change our focus and look at space, or we can change our focus and look at time. They appear here on Earth to be like aspects of the same thing, depending on where you put your focus.
Yes.
So can you, in a nutshell, give me a sense of like fundamentally what is space and fundamentally what is time?
I'm not sure I can do that.
It's a terrible question.
Very clearly. It is a really hard question. And it's also a thing that I've thought about a lot because, as I say, heaven relates to space and earth relates to time, then people always say, oh, but what about 6 climates? That's to do with something that comes from the atmosphere, So that's a problem in itself. And
that's a different level.
Yes, exactly. There's heavenly sort of space stuff, and then there's earthly within our atmosphere space stuff, if you see what I mean. And I think the fundamental idea is that humans are between heaven and earth. And so heaven, which is to do with the movement of the planets and the tones of the planets and the vibrations and all those things that work in a cyclical way that are to do with round things like space, describe our innermost core stuff. That's why our Zhang store pure substances, because they're heavenly substances, if you want, something like that.
Zhang are a reflection of the heavenly stems.
Yes, you could say that. Yes, you could totally say that. And then, heaven initiates, that's like Qian, the first hexagram of the I Ching. And then earth responds, that's Kun, the second hexagram of the I Ching. So earth responds to the impulse of 5 and 10, to the impulse of space, and it responds with time, with 6 and 12, if you want. And 6 and 12 don't move in a circular fashion, they move in another fashion, which we'll find out next time. And 6 and 12 are, if you want, the response to that impetus. So they're more like our Fu, our 6 Fu, for instance, as an example, something like that. Also, if you think about humans, and you think about a human, is conception, and then you spend 10 lunar months of pregnancy in the womb, you are in space, but you're not actually in time. So time for a human only starts the moment that you're born. And the moment that you're born is the moment that 10 organs becomes 12 organs or channels, because the channel system doesn't actually function until the moment we're born. The moment that we're born is the moment that we have Minister Fire, Shinju or Shinbaolo or pericardium and Sanjiao 3 heater, they clock in. And I'm definitely going to be talking about this when I talk about branches next time.
Okay. You just said 10 lunar months. And I'm like, okay, right, 10 heavenly stems.
Exactly. Exactly.
Of the energies.
Yes.
We're still in space because we haven't been born.
Yep.
And so we're forming those energies, those 10 months.
We're in creation. We're not in created.
Yes, we're in. I remember using that term creation and created. So thank you for that reminder. And also, when we look at our Uxing, our 5 phases, when we are in the creation phase, let me see if I have this right. We're in the creation phase. That's when it looks like a pentagon, and in the created phase, Earth is in the middle.
I'm not sure that we can make those kind of assumptions, but the cosmological map of Wuxing has got Earth in the center. And that is the same as, for instance, the STEM map of the sky, for instance, where you've got Earth at the center. There's a really fascinating book by Kistemacher, which is and it's called Constellating the Han Sky or something like that. It's a pretty rare book, but it's brilliant because what it's looking at is it's looking at the way that the stars are organized in the sky, and that is seen as a map of the way that Han society was arranged. So the center of the sky around the polar star is the place where the emperor lives. Mm-hmm. And it's where Beidou then kind of moves around it, and that Beidou is like the chariot of the emperor. And then there's certain areas, like for instance in the west, I think it is, that's where the merchants are. And so all the stars in the west have got sort of merchanty type names. I mean, I'm kind of guessing here, but that kind of idea. Do you see what I mean? So there's a complete correlation between what happened in the sky and then the way that the society was organized in the Han on Earth. There's also another thing which I haven't talked about at all, and which is slightly separate to this, and it's actually to do with 9, and that's called the Fenn-Year system, which is another thing where you're kind of correlating the sky, the stars, the areas of the sky. The sky is divided into 9, and then that's correlated to different states, different Chinese states. So that's also kind of a very well documented system. Yeah. And also we could say this about Egypt as well. In ancient Egypt, that there's the idea that the Nile is a representation of the Milky Way, and then where the location of the pyramids and the Sphinx is specifically related to, I don't know, maybe Leo or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's a similar sort of thing. So it's a thing that happened in early civilizations because of the fact that we looked at the sky and we completely related to the sky, and we felt that what was happening up there was totally in charge of our lives. We also try to physically locate ourselves and place ourselves with relation to what we saw in the sky.
I think this is something that humans do. We do it on the cultural level. We do it on an individual level.
Absolutely.
We have this heavenly impulse, or we could even say we have an idea about how we think the dang world works. Let's call it a belief system. And now we constellate everything in our life around that because we're seeking some kind of order.
Yeah, that's right. And the order, the heavenly order, or the order of the sky from Shang, Zhou, and then sort of really classified strongly in the Han, was this idea of this cosmological order where you've got the Earth in the center and then the 4 directions, which were like manifestations of the center, because and I know that already in Shang times, what became China, it wasn't China then, was the idea of we are the people of the center, and then everybody else in the 4 directions, they're barbarians. There's the northern ones, the southern ones, the eastern ones, and the western ones. They already defined them by the directions, sort of thing. Yes. So already the layout was like that.
Yes, well, and that comes down to the present moment, because even here in America, I have Chinese people calling me a foreigner. Yes. It's like, no, you're the foreigner. It's like, nope, you're the Western foreigner.
Yeah, and China is the land between the 4 seas. So, China always defined itself from very, very early on as being within the 4 directions, within the 4 seas, even though there are no 4 seas around China. Do you know what I mean?
It's exactly. It's that kind of
sacred
idea.
Sacred geography type idea.
And again, all joking aside, I think that is very intrinsic to being a human being. We define the world with us, this thing we call us, the meat suit, the, whatever we call us, as the center.
Yeah.
World's made up of all these dramatically dispersed centers. It's a bit of mystery, isn't it?
I think it's also a bit daft, because we consider ourselves to be much more important than we are. And I think it's quite important to remember that actually we are just little ants on the surface of this amazing planet, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But there you go. So anyway, space, 5, cosmological, Earth in the center.
Yep. And we're daft and we're amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Just like there's space and there's time. There's these, it depends on where you want to land your attention. You can see different things.
Yeah. You can change your focus from the wide angle to the extremely narrow angle.
Yes. Now, we're going to get into other stuff here. I thought I was going to spend like 2 minutes on this, but evidently I'm really hung up on it. I was talking with someone the other day on the podcast, and they were talking a bit about something I don't know much about, even though I read a little. I still can't say I know much about it, but the idea of like the quantum world, that there, at the quantum level, there aren't things, there are possibilities. There's not particles, there's waves. And again, depending on what we do with our attention, we can perceive a wave or we could perceive a particle. And so this also, to me, seems to be an aspect of looking at time and space. In space, we have more particle and potential, and in time, we have more, in space, we have more wave, and in time, we have more particle. Is that right? Does that make sense?
or in space, we have a cyclical movement,
Mm-hmm.
and in time, we have a sine wave. And I don't know how much you've looked at these sorts of things, but something that was a massive eye opener for me, and I can't remember exactly what the name of the guy was, but I think he was an architect, and that really explained a lot to me. But anyway, if you have a circle and you have a point on that circle, and you move that circle around, you just turn the circle, the point makes a sine wave. So a circle that is moving in time makes a sine wave.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
I do see what you mean.
Something like that.
Okay, great. That's a helpful image. Heaven, circular, earth, sine wave.
Yeah. Motion
through time. Okay, great. I'm not sure how that's going to help me in clinic, and I'm not sure how that's going to help me in my everyday thinking, but that lands for me, and it sounds right, and it gives me a place to stand so I can explore it.
Okay. Well, I think a lot of this stuff is, my partner talks about me always going over groundwork. And from my point of view, if we can be clear about groundwork, then we're much more focused and clear about what we do in clinic, even though it might not necessarily initially seem immediately applicable.
I'm with you on that, because there's something about the way that we are capable of perceiving. If we have a wider or more flexible frame, I think it helps us in clinic.
And I want to think like a Han or Tang Dynasty Chinese medicine practitioner. So the more I can immerse myself in this understanding, in this way of seeing the world, the better I can treat.
I would suggest that if these principles are as universal as they seem, and if they are real, and I'm going to work under the hypothesis that they are, there are some reflections and resonances here that are real, then regardless of whether we're living in a Han frame or a modern Western frame, if we are connected to this, then we are connected to it, and then it can inform us.
Yeah.
That's my suspicion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Moving along, there's this thing, it's from the Huainanzi 3, about about yang being like light and, associated with the sky. And then there's earth, which is turbid and associated with, or turbidity and heaviness associated with the earth. And I remember you talking about this in your presentation, and my first thought was, oh, it's kind of damp and sticky and gooey and turbid down here. No wonder it's such a mess. Right? And I mean, in a way it is, right? Living here in this earthly realm, it's messy, it's sticky, it's, the word turbid I think is great. There's a lot of unclarity. And that's not a judgment Earth is bad.
No.
It's a description of the nature of the thing that we happen to be embedded in. It's not saying, oh, heaven's good, look, it's clear and blah, 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 and, Earth, this gooey, ball of gunk. But it's kind of helpful knowing, oh, yeah, Earth's kind of a gooey ball of gunk.
And it's a translation issue because, I use the words heaven and earth, and I'm not using them in a religious context. And when people hear the word heaven, then they think that I mean, ta-da, heaven.
Right.
Yes. I don't even believe in heaven. It means nothing to me in that way. I'm talking about these opposites that are like the prototypes of clear, light, up there stuff, and space, and dense, turbid, heavy, down here stuff. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So I've got a buddy, my friend David Toon, who I've known for years. We've studied Shanghan Lin together. He's been dipping into the heavenly stems and branches as well. And so on occasion, we'll just pull up a Zoom conversation just to chew the fat, because he's in a different city. And one of the things that he's mentioned, and this really stuck with me, he said one of the challenges he thinks for us Westerners is that the heavenly stems and branches comes from the mindset of a people very different from us who have this Judeo-Christian perspective. And we can't get away from it. I mean, you cannot believe in God and you cannot believe in, any of that stuff, but you can't get away from that we have this Judeo-Christian salvational mindset. And it permeates everything we do. And we can't bring this idea of salvation into looking at the stems and branches because it doesn't belong here. But it's easy to bring it in and sort of contaminate it.
You can't bring it into any Chinese, let alone Chinese medicine thought. One of the reasons why I talked about this on a slide that's got the Tai Chi tool, the yin yang, whatever you want to call it, symbol on it, is because I'm trying to remind you that I'm talking about what then we then see as yin yang. Do you know what I mean? So, don't get stuck on heaven and earth as having some connotations that means nothing. And also that's another reason why I talk about space and the sky and the planets, because I'm trying to sort of totally separate myself from these things. But yeah, you're right. We've got this background, doesn't matter what we do.
Right. This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code Qiological for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Okay. I'm moving along here. Let me take a quick look at my... Okay, all right. Now, we're kind of warmed up, so I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to show my complete ignorance. It's so great to sit down with you and be able to have this conversation, right? Because again, I feel like I get these little pings of, oh, there might be something here. So we have the Wuxing, the 5 phases, and we're all very familiar with that because that's what we learn in Chinese medicine school. It's one of the fundamentals of our medicine. Most of us have no idea what's behind the 5 phases. We just kind of take it a priori. Yeah, that's it. It's kind of cool and it's poetic and, that's really groovy. What I'm finding and talking with you is this stems and branches is the dang source code behind it. It's like, oh, we can go in and like, if you were a computer person, you can like go in and see the code. You can read the code. You can see what's going on with the matrix.
I usually tell my students, because I see them at the end of their program, and I say, we've been pulling the wool over your eyes for the whole time that you've been at college, and now you're going to find out why the things are that we told you were so, rather than just you taking our word for it, which is basically what you've done.
That's right. So there's the Wuxing, but you also talk about, with heavenly stems, the Wuyun. Here, this is interesting. So Xing means movement. Yun also means movement.
Yes, it does.
So we have the 5 movements and the 5 movements. Now, we learn about the Wuxing, 5 phases, 5 elements, blah, blah, blah. But the Wuyun, that's a different kettle of fish.
Yes.
Right. So I've got some ideas on how they might be different. I'm not going to ask you for an explanation. I'm going to throw out my thinking and see if I have this. So the 5 phases are what we learn in school. The Wuyun are these. It's more the movements in heaven than the movements on earth. Does that sound correct?
Sometimes I talk about them as being heavenly 5 phases.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
And they move differently. It's like the movement characteristic is different than the 5 phases. So, for example, let me scroll up to this slide here, the Yun pairs.
Yep.
Which essentially is the co-cycle as we learn the 5 phases.
Yeah.
Okay? But we look at things like yang wood, which would be gallbladder, going into yin earth, which would be spleen, and that creates earth, according to this diagram.
Earth yun.
Earth yun.
Not earth phase.
Oh, I missed that. Okay, earth yun.
Yeah.
Okay, earth yun. And then we have like yang earth, stomach, going into yin water, kidney. That is fire yun, not fire phase, fire yun.
Yeah, that's right. We say that wu, earth yang, and gui, water yin, share the same yun, which is fire yun. And it can be an active yun, that's taiguo, or a passive yun, that's buji.
Taiguo meaning too much, or buji meaning not enough.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, that's helpful. Fire yun, not fire phase.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at the slide that is 1, 2, 3 before this one, that's got the pairings of that one.
Right here. Yep.
This one's got the pairings. You can see that's wood, yang, jia on the top line. And then on the far right, there's earth, yin, ji.
Ji.
And they're sharing the same yun, which is the yellow color.
Yes.
And then the yang one is taiguo and the yin one is buji.
So does this mean that jia, or if we're bringing it down into like an organ, we're gonna say the gallbladder.
Yes.
Tends to be like excessive in its.
It means that its yun is excessive.
Its yun is excessive.
So jia is an earth yun taiguo. It's more active. It's overly, it's yang in its movement, it's Tai. Yeah. While Ji is, in terms of sound or in terms of action, it's Buji, but it's still Earth Yun. Yeah. So it's like two sides of, it's like you're looking at two cherries that are joined together. It's the same Yun. Yeah.
Yep.
One is more up. It's like pushing, pushing, pushing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is more, it's a little bit more Buji, something like that. So, but they share the same Yun. Yeah. So just like when we're looking at something that shares the same phase,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, the liver and the gallbladder, quite often you have a problem that is in the liver, but it manifests in the gallbladder channel, for instance, because the liver might be insufficient, but it causes an excess in the gallbladder. Yeah. So
Right.
that's the same idea of two cherries on the same stalk, two stalks with two cherries. One's underactive, and it causes the other one to be overactive. Do you see what I mean? It's a similar sort of relationship, this kind of balancing relationship that we have with two organs within the same phase. We can have the same idea of organs with this that share the same Yun. And like, for instance, an easy way to describe that they share the same Yun, and I was trying to say that this is really clear in the body. For instance, if you look at gallbladder and spleen, because they share the same Yun, which is earth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how unlikely is it that this could happen in the body? You've got Yang Ling Chuan, gallbladder 34, and Yin Ling Chuan, spleen 9. They are opposite each other, either side of the knee.
Yes, they are.
How weird is that? And then you go down, and then you've got San Yin Jiao, 3, spleen 6. And then you've got gallbladder 39, which has got a variety of different names. And they're, so one's the 3-leg yin luo and the other one's the 3-leg yang luo, and they're pretty much opposite.
Yes, they are. Okay. Beautiful.
Do you see what I mean?
I do
so
see what you mean.
So it's not by chance. Yeah.
And here's something that's interesting as well. In terms of physiological function, that gallbladder is really important to digestion. The earth really needs that gallbladder to work well.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Resonances all over the place. Okay. So it's very easy in my mind. I'm going to have to work on this. It's very easy in my mind to get confused between the movements of the Uxing and the movements of the Dayun.
Yes.
Okay. So that I'm going to be on guard for that. I didn't have, prior to this conversation, I wasn't making that distinction. I knew there was a distinction. I sensed there was a distinction, but now I'm starting to realize the importance of that.
I was trying to show that there are different ways to pair organs.
Yes.
And you can pair organs by phase. We all know that. But you can also pair organs by Yun.
Yes.
And the body seems to be constructed very much in terms of Yun pairings, but we just didn't know about it.
So can you help me think about how to see the Yun movements like in our clinical work? Can you give me an example or two of something that shows up and it's like there's a Yun movement?
Well, I'm not sure if I can show you a Yun movement in clinic, but I can tell you ways that you can think about using Yun, because when you talked about the fact that they're going back to that picture that you had there with the Yun pairs, the one that looks like a fight, that one. Yeah. And if you look, it says Yun pairs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you were trying to describe that, I said, one way to think about this is that this is 5 phases, but on a heavenly level.
Mm-hmm.
So from my point of view, if I see somebody who is got an earth problem, an earth phase problem, I might treat their earth phase. I might do a stomach point, a spleen point, blah, blah, blah. And then if I see them again, and then I see them again, and I see them again, and that problem is still there, and it's not moving, then I might choose to affect the earth on a heavenly level. And affecting the earth on a heavenly level means using earth yun. So that means using, for instance, a gallbladder point with a spleen point.
Likewise, if I want to affect the lung yun.
The metal yun. Are you talking about the metal yun?
I'm talking about the metal yun. Yes, thank you. It's so funny. We use this shorthand, and so often in my mind, I'm thinking metal, but I'll say lung because, of course, we preference the yin organs, and we use it as a shorthand interchangeably very easily. I just did it. That's great. Thank you for catching me on it. I think we do this all the time in our clinical work. We think we're working with a phase, but in our mind, we're using the organ shorthand, and then we miss out on everything that the phase has to offer because we're constricted to thinking within the organ. So this is super helpful. Yes, I'm thinking metal, a problem with the metal manifesting in the lung. So let's talk about it that way. Because you have a problem with the metal manifesting in the large intestine. So yes, manifesting in the lung. So maybe I would need to do something that's on the small intestine channel as well as the lung channel.
Right. So there, what you're doing is that you are not working on the metal yun, but you are balancing the yun that is to do with the lung. That's a slightly different thing because what you're actually working on is on the water yun, and you're balancing it. So what you're saying is, oh, look, the lung part of this pair is not working very well. So I'm going to use the other one, which is the small intestine, to balance that water yun.
Oh, you know what? I was looking at that blue and I like translated that into metal, but that's water. Okay, so that's fine. Fair, and fair enough. Because maybe
and that's also a perfectly valid thing to do.
It's a perfectly valid thing to do. Let's use me an example. Me and my dry lungs and dry cough. Bringing some more moisture into the lung.
Yes.
That
would be
helpful.
really, really good. So you'd be using the water yun, so water at a heavenly level to help your lungs. And you could do that with a small intestine point and with a lung point, because then if you use both, then that's even better. And obviously it's the choice of the point that makes the difference, because what you're not going to do is you're not going to look for a super fiery small intestine point to help your lung, are you?
Probably not.
No.
Okay. Now, yes, and thank you. So I'm looking more clearly at this. If I wanted to use the metal yun,
yes,
then I would be using large intestine and liver,
which is a very common point combination. People don't realize that they're doing the 4 gates, for instance.
So this is where the 4 gates comes from.
I think so, yeah. If you've ever read Sticking to the Point by Bob Flores, he's talking about point combinations. He actually does have a very short section that says, oh, yeah, actually, there's these combinations, which are to do with, some weird stems and branches thing. And he's talking about exactly this point.
Okay. So with that being the case, I'm one of these people where if I see something, in this case, 4 gates, my mind goes to, okay, that's really effective, and we know that's helpful. So given these yun pairs, given these yun relationships, does that also mean that I could find a 4 gates that was stomach and kidney, or a 4 gates that was urinary bladder and heart, or, as we just spoke, small intestine, lung?
It might not be called 4 gates, but if you think about the 4 gates, what do the 4 gates do? What are they useful for?
Well, we talk about them for relieving stagnation and dramatically moving qi.
Yeah. So are they sort of moving and opening?
They're dynamic. They're very dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So metal, which is the yun here, if you think about what you know about metal in terms of a phase, metal is about the surface of our body, the exterior of our body, and it's the ability to open to the exterior or close from the exterior in the best way possible. Yeah. Like the pores, for instance, they open and close at the right time. That's a very sort of metallic thing to do. Yeah. So this is doing this, but at a heavenly level. So it's making sure that everything is moving and then expelling if necessary. Yeah. As we need, or condensing and moving. Yeah. Whatever. That kind of idea. So it's still the whole idea about metal, but it's metal at another level, if you want. With respect to the idea of having a four gates with the other yun, it won't necessarily be a four gates because it's always with relation to the quality of the yun. So if I want to work on fire at a heavenly level, what is fire in a phase relationship? What does that mean? It's to do with consciousness, it's to do with awareness, it's to do with all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And here it's relating the stomach and the kidneys. So it's actually to do with relating our postnatal chi and our prenatal chi. It's to do with making sure that our body is functioning properly so that we are able to receive consciousness and awareness, so that we're able to process stuff properly. Just like, it's a little bit like establishing that vertical axis, if you want. And you look at where the stomach and the kidneys are, they're parallel, completely parallel. Oh, by chance. How odd is that? Yeah. And of course, you can, again, in the choice of your points, you can really do a lot, because you could choose to do, a stomach point at the top of the body and a kidney point at the bottom of the body. And at the same time, you're also working with fire yun. So you've got fire, earth, and water all together. Do you see what I mean? So there's a lot of laterality and different layers that you can work with. And I really want to encourage people to look at the immense possibilities that you have here. Because, actually in chapters 66 and 66 to 74, they don't tell you about point combinations at all. They just give you like the broad brush structure. And I'm trying to look at how we can use this clinically. And this is stuff that we can play with. We can really play with this. And it's really effective.
Well, and it seems really fun and dynamic and like intellectually playful as well. That's always fun. So in hearing you talk about this fire yun between the stomach and the kidney, the first thought that comes up is, someone who's dealing with trauma, someone who can't quite like work something through. This could be really helpful.
It could be.
It could be. It's something to think about. We could explore it. Now, in my very simple mind, I was looking at the four gates. Both of those are your end source points, and thinking, well, maybe I could do your end source points, for each of these. Maybe that's helpful. Now, when I start mapping them out, I realize, well, that's interesting. The liver and large intestine, hands and feet. The only other one that's hands and feet is urinary bladder and heart. The others are on like the foot or on the hand, so to speak. So, I just look at that and go, okay, I'm not sure what that means, but I think if you could work with hands and feet, it'll be more dynamic. And then I hear you saying, okay, stomach channel, kidney channel. Well, you could pick something on the torso and something on the feet. And now here we go with that broad dynamic. So what I'm taking away from this, I could explore those source points. I could check them out, see how they work, but I could also explore all the way along the channel.
Definitely. I totally encourage people to explore all along the channel. I am sad to hear that people do not learn all the acupuncture points. I'd be very, very happy to do something like stomach 7, for instance, which is brilliant action on the jaw, on the ear, on the eye, all sorts of stuff like that, with some rooting kidney 5. Do you see what I mean? That would be a brilliant thing for me. Or, you mentioned the bladder and the heart, which have the same yun, and it's a wood yun. Yeah. So for me, this is the most exterior, Tai Yang, and the most interior, Shao Yin. So what I'm doing there is I'm working with the back and the front, or the outside and the inside. Yeah. And I also know that Tai Yang, or the bladder channel, that's, you mentioned, I mentioned about the 10 lunar months of pregnancy, and each one of these relate to a stem. It's not in the same order as the stems, but almost, because the stems go yang, yin, yang, yin, but the 10 months of pregnancy go yin, yang, yin, yang. So the last channel, the last organ in the 10 lunar months of pregnancy is actually the bladder rather than the kidney. And so that's why the bladder has all those back shoe points that relate to each organ, because it's completion. It's like taking it all in and connecting everything up, if you want. So the bladder is very much to do with completing the physical form.
I'm just letting that sink in for a moment. That just makes so much sense. It's like the form is created in the womb, and then the Taiyang channel, last to form, ties it all together, wraps it up. There's your exterior. There's your package. You're now ready to go out into this other world. You got everything you need, and you're a formed and consolidated, coherent being now, or at least have the potential.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. And I love this idea of using these yun pairs to explore relationships between two different channels. I can't tell you how often I'm in clinic and someone comes in and I'm just scratching my head. I'm like, what do I do with this person? I mean, sometimes it's very clear, but sometimes it's really not. And I go searching in the pulse, or I'll do some palpation, or, I'm looking for a place where I can feel like I've got, it's like if you want to lift something heavy, you got to kind of root yourself. And then you can lift something heavy. And when I do a treatment, I want a place where I can root myself before I start putting needles in people. And thinking about these yun pairs and the movement of the yun, and then I can take what I know about channel palpation and sensing, engaging vitality style, or, maybe even finding something in the pulse that represents these. I just feel like I've got a place now where I can go when I don't know and explore.
It's very useful.
Oh, man, I can't wait. Glancing through my notes here. First, thank you. I feel excited is what I feel. Like, oh, I'm beginning to get a glimpse at these yun pairs separate from how I think about the 5 phases. And I'm just beginning. I'm at that very beginning phase. It's like when you learn a language and you have no idea what people are talking about, and you have no idea what people are talking about, and you have no idea what people are talking about. And then you go to the dumpling store and they say, Chu Lo Shang. And you go, oh, right, go upstairs. I'm like, wait a minute, I understood that.
Hooray,
wait, what?
I got it.
So this is really helpful.
That's nice, isn't it? It's like dreaming. You know that you've got a language when you start dreaming in that language, and suddenly you wake up and you think, oh my God, I actually dreamt in French. Amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It's a lovely revelation.
It's a milestone. It's a little marker. It's like, okay, you made some progress. Yeah. All right. A couple other different questions. I'm moving away from yun pairs right now.
Okay.
So there's this phrase, and it is from the, I think it's Suwen. Where is it? Got my notes here. I think it's Suwen 66. Yang creates, yin grows. Yang kills. Ooh, there's that salvational mind coming in going, what? Yin stores. Yang kills, yin stores.
Yes, and that's different because what it says is that in heaven, yang creates and yin supports yang, doesn't it? Or something like that. You go back, it's a slide that's before this one. Yeah. We were at it before. There it is. It's the very bottom line there. Yes. It says, in heaven, yang generates and yin grows. And on earth, yang kills and yin stores. And I think I left that in because it's a thing, one of those things that, you know, those little niggly things that go around in your mind and it kind of bugs you a lot. And this was the thing that bugged me a lot, was that we always talk about yang and yin. But actually in our world, we're looking at things in terms of yin and yang. Do you know what I mean? There's some kind of, there's a difference in the order. And there was always this kind of idea that, you know, the way that things happen in heaven then sort of gets inverted when you see them on earth. So quite often when you look at the duograms or the trigrams, then, you know, nowadays when we look at the trigrams or the hexagrams, we write them from the bottom up. But if we were in heaven, then we'd write them from the top down, something like that. So this idea about a different, you know, like a change in direction, in dimension, yeah, which I usually explain like this. I've got a little video about this actually, because I keep on explaining it all the time. So if I move my finger in a clockwise fashion, I'm moving my finger in a clockwise fashion and I'm looking at it from above, it's clockwise. And if I keep on moving my finger in the clockwise fashion, but I look at it from below, it's actually moving in an anti-clockwise. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, yeah? I do. Yes.
So although it's the same movement, the same action, it depends which side you're looking at it, from above or below. Yeah. So in heaven, nothing happens until yang moves, until yang generates, until yang does something. Yeah. And then yin supports that action. Yeah. So then yin grows. But actually on our world, on earth, where we live, then we store yin. We don't, do you see what I mean? Yeah. So yang is actually the opposite thing. It's the thing that we can die from, too much yang. When we run out of yin, when we run out of jing, we die.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? It's not when we run out of yang.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of qi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Well, wouldn't we also die if we ran out of yang? We could.
We could do, but what we do is we store the yin. We don't store the yang. It's from the yin that you can make the yang. Like if you look at what is the fire of Ming Men, the fire of Ming Men is the fire in the water. So we have to have enough water to be able to sustain that fire. Mm-hmm. That's why we store the yin, so that we can have that fire. Yeah. So we're kind of doing things from the yin point of view rather than the yang point of view. But when we're in heaven, it's the yang before the yin. So in heaven, we say yang, then yin. And then on our planet, then we say yin, then yang. Do you see what I mean?
So at the heavenly level, we're talking about yang yin.
Yes.
And at the earthly level, we're talking about yin yang.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Which I think is a really helpful way to remind us, don't confuse the movement and influence of heaven with the experience and unfolding of earth. They are macrocosm and microcosm. They reflect each other, but they are not the same thing.
No, they're in constant interaction. But remember that I said when I talked about the stems just now and at the beginning, and we were talking about the stems, and I said, heaven, it moves in cycles, it relates to 5 and 10, and it's the initiator. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then earth, it moves in these kind of sort of sine wave things, and it responds to what heaven sends it, if you want. Yeah, that kind of idea.
So I want to come back to this thing about yang kills in just a moment, but first I want to talk a little bit about consciousness. I don't delve into this realm too often because I don't understand it too well, but what's coming to mind for me right now is we talk about yang initiating and in responding. Could you say that when we use our consciousness and we like make a plan or we form an intention, that this earthly plane will then respond to that intention or to that plan?
I think you've got a translation issue. So when an embryo is formed, when there is conception, I think it might be in Ling Shu 30 or something like that. It talks about the fact that two jing come together, two yin things come together. And then the idea is that at least for the first 3 months of after conception, they talk about the Gao paste, and, it's kind of like forming this kind of like unclear sort of thing that is like very pure, but it's basically like super jing, something like that. And it's only in the 3rd month of pregnancy that it attracts the Shen into the body. So until the 3rd month of pregnancy, which is called the quickening, actually, in Western terms, until the 3rd month of pregnancy, the 3rd lunar month of pregnancy, that embryo has no consciousness, if you think about it in that way. So again, what you have there is that you store the yin, and then that brings the Shen, which is yang, into the body. It's like an antenna. It's like, okay, I'm ready for you now. This is the one that's coming. Something like that. Yeah. You talk about intention. Now, intention, that's a very difficult word in terms of translation.
Agreed.
Because
even in English,
you look at that word and intention, which we use to translate the word yi, which is the will of the spleen. And when I talk about yi, I like to just point out, which is something that Elizabeth pointed out and has really remained with me, is that yi is actually yin as of the 5 tones that I've talked about loads here in the stems presentation, and then it's got the heart underneath. So the idea is that yi is something that is resonating with the sound or the tone of the heart. Intention is not I want, my will, I intend. That it's the wrong translation. What yi means is the spleen is somehow the form, the resonance of the heart, the resonance of our consciousness, something like that. And the spleen has this job anyway, because the spleen is the physicality of our consciousness. It's our body, it's our form. Yeah. And it's always in that place between the heart and the kidneys. It's on that vertical axis. The heart and the kidneys have got something to allow it to connect. And that's the spleen. Yeah. And the same thing with the will, the zhi. The willpower isn't my will above anything else. The willpower is I'm rooted, I'm connected, I'm a plant, I am well rooted, I am upright. I am human, yeah, I am, and I'm between my heavenly connection, my Shen, and my earthly rooting, my zhi, yeah, and the spleen is between the two. It's kind of making that connection so that the willpower is then, my will is then connecting with what my Shen says I should do, and then the yi goes, okay, I know what the will is. I know what the Shen is. So now I can intend to do whatever I'm going to do. Do you see what I'm saying?
So you're describing here our human capacity to actually be between heaven and earth. It's embodied in us.
Yes.
Not just as an idea, but with our
No.
Shen and our Zhi and our Yi.
Yes.
And
that's our vertical axis.
That's all vertical axis.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at lots and lots of Chinese literature, and obviously Confucian literature comes to mind, but it's not only Confucian stuff. I've seen Taoist stuff as well. It's that, this idea about being an upright person, being a correct person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to do with, oh, I'm really uptight. It's to do with being aligned with, my Zhi, the way that I am built. Why am my Ming Men tells me that I have to do things in this particular way. My Ming Men is like they call it the door of destiny. And again, I think that's a stupid way of describing it. It's my Tian Ming. It's my heavenly mandate. My heavenly mandate says, this is what you need to do in your life. This is how your life is going to unfold. And I'm constantly connected to that, how my life is going to unfold, which is my Zhi, my Ming Men, all that kind of stuff. And then I'm also constantly referring to the Shen, which is my heavenly, light, my Shen Ming, my illumination that is saying, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's it. And if you do that, then your life unfolds in the best possible way. So it's not to do with my intention. Do you see what I mean? It's not a personal thing. It's an unfolding of what I've been given.
So I get that. And that's really helpful.
And that's my verticality.
Yes.
And then there's the horizontal, which is the Yi between the Hun and the Po. And the Hun and the Po, they're like the physical manifestations of the Shen and the Zhi, really. One is Hun, which is like the Shen, and the other one was Po, which wants to be like Jing and Zhi. Do you see what I mean? So that's why you've got 10 of them. There's 3 Hun, heaven, earth, and man, and there's 7 Po, which is much more to do with, my physicality, something like that.
Okay. So is this why, or does this in some way touch on or illuminate that there's a thing, when I've traveled, I've had a thing I'm going to call a traveler's luck. I decide I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to go do something. And along the way, you meet troubles, of course, because that's life. But you also meet extraordinary help along the way, right? Or you begin something new, and there's a thing, and we have a word for it in English, beginner's luck, right? And the universe is like, oh, you're putting your attention on this. Oh, you want to do this. Let me show you what's possible. Bing. And it's like you're really good at it. Or you get a glimpse of where you can go. And then it goes away. Because you actually have to do it. You have to walk that journey.
You have to remain aligned. I think you have to remain aligned in some way.
But I think you also get a glimpse. My suspicion is the universe, for lack of a better word, when we have that, like, I'm going to do this, not because, it's like I want $1 million or something, but when we are in alignment, when the Zhi in the Yi, in the Shen are in alignment, it's like things will respond here in this turbid world. You have a little bit of synchronicity, someone shows up, things happen that otherwise wouldn't happen.
Yes.
100%. Okay.
I mean, I have, I've got 3 children, and one of my children, he's a very strange chap. But I always thought that, like the heavens smile on him. He is one of those people where everything, even when he's in a total mess, things just seem to unfold in the most amazing way for him, really easily. And he is the only one that is most in tune with himself. He'll come into himself and he'll think, oh, how does my body feel about this? Instead of thinking, I'm just going to overrule this and do this anyway, because my mind knows what I need to do. He goes into himself and goes, well, what does my body say I want to do? And he follows that. And it seems to work really amazingly.
There it is. Yep. Yep. Beautiful. Okay. One more thing. I want to come back to this Earth Wei Yang Sha. On Earth, Yang kills. This kills thing, I don't quite grasp it. How's this fit? Earth kills, yin stores. Can you help me think about this a bit? Because
Yang kills, yin
yeah,
stores.
yeah.
To be honest, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. My mind is thinking about, I'm considering the whole kind of seasonal cycle of events.
Mm.
And I'm thinking that when you look at if you look at the young seasons, which are some spring and summer, then the only way that that works is that once you have flourished as much as you can, then things have to die off.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the yin seasons, what happens there is that that's all about storage. And what you're actually doing is you're storing the yang for the next cycle.
For the next cycle.
So I'm wondering whether it might be something like that. And I wonder whether, the thing about the, oh my God, yang kills, it's not really, kills as of it's killing us off, but more that this is a cyclical movement.
Yes.
And we have to go through these processes, something like that,
I think you're right. And thank you for joining me in this moment of, I'm not sure what that means. Let's puzzle on this. This is like the coolest part of learning, when we're right at the edge. So what the hell does that mean? It's like, well,
yeah,
I'm not sure. Maybe it's this.
Because it doesn't say death.
No, it doesn't say death.
Sir.
But here's what it says in the first part. Yang creates.
Yeah.
In heaven, Yang creates. On earth, Yang brings to an end.
Yeah.
Every cycle of creation is also a moment of destruction.
Exactly.
So there we are.
That takes us back to Judeo-Christian fear. It's like, oh my God, it talks about death, it talks about killing.
Right.
But actually, this is a cyclical, that's a fundamental thing, is we're constantly looking at cyclical movements.
Yes.
And, we can't suddenly get into a thing where we go, oh, I'm not going to look at that bit. I'm only going to look at this. I only want to look at what's good and beautiful in life. Well, I'm sorry, life's not like that.
Doesn't work that
There's
way.
also the shitty, dirty, horrible things. That's the way it goes. You have full moon, you have new moon, you have winter, you have summer, you have life, you have death.
Yes.
That's the way it is. That is what life on Earth's about.
And the yin stores the yang. The yang goes out and flourishes, and then you bring it in.
Yes, of course. That's, otherwise we can't have a new cycle. No new cycle unless we store it.
Okay, beautiful.
And that, that is mirrored by that thing that I just said, is that how can we have Ming Men? Ming Men is stored within the yin of the body, within the water of the body.
Cycles and cycles and cycles. Yeah. It's tricky for us Westerners with our linear salvational thinking to embody the sense of cyclicality, I'm going to call it. It's tricky. I mean, we can do it. One of the beautiful things about practicing Chinese medicine is it's an opportunity to embody that cyclical flow that is always here, but our Western consciousness has a little oil and water thing going on with it. But, we think about it and we stick with it and we practice and we see the reality of it and how our patients respond to the work that we do. And, maybe we understand it just a little bit more.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, here's hoping. All right. Well, that pretty much covers the questions and thoughts that I had from your last presentation on the heavenly stems. So thank you.
Oh, you are welcome. Maybe
so much
we'll
for
have
this.
another one when you come up with a whole load of questions after the next one.
Well, and I suspect as I see how this unfolds in my clinical work, especially as I put my attention and focus on the Yun movements, yes, I will have both some questions and maybe some insights to share.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. All right, Deborah. Thank you so much for this delightful conversation.
You are welcome.
Well, that might have not been an easy listen, and perhaps you had to rewind a few times to be able to stick with the conversation. I'm so appreciative that Deborah took the time to help me puzzle through the heavenly stems. I certainly don't understand it completely, but I'm rather used to that with Chinese medicine, especially when I'm at my growing edge of taking on something new. We talk about how Chinese medicine is thousands of years old, but understanding it as the ancients did, I suspect that might be out of our grasp. We can't even understand aspects of our own culture from as little as 50 years ago. But getting a glimpse of the source code, which I suspect the stems and branches are part of, that might give us the possibility of applying fundamental principles in our modern clinics. It might help us to better understand our own unfolding in this moment of time and hopefully aid us in being of assistance to others. I'm particularly excited to explore in my practice how using both the yang and the yin of the Ke cycle might inform my clinical gaze and treatment. And I learned this too. Be careful not to mix up phase and organ. I know that for myself. Often enough, I say lung when I actually mean metal. It's kind of a mental shorthand that I've noticed many of us doing. We mix up the yin organ of a phase and allow that to represent the phase itself. I think it might be kind of a laxity in thinking, and it will cause problems because organs are an aspect of the phase, or yun for that matter. And so if you use the term lung and metal interchangeably, then you can quickly instill some confusion into your thinking, as these are different logical types. I know that I've made this mistake. All right, friends, that is probably more than enough for one day. I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation and found it worth the time that you spent on it. The entire series of Deborah's 3 introductory talks on the heavenly stems and the earthly branches, it's available over on the website, along with a couple of other podcasts with her. So do check those out. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.